My son told me he was taking me on my first vacation in more than 20 years. He knew how long I had dreamed of seeing the ocean, so when he said that he and his wife wanted me to travel with them, I believed it was an act of love, but when I arrived at the airport, I discovered that the reservation had been made for only one passenger, me. The destination was not a beach resort, and my son had no intention of getting on the plane. Welcome to Unheard Drama Stories, where the painful truths hidden behind family smiles are finally heard. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because today's story proves that sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from the person you trusted most. My name is Margaret Ellis, and I was 62 years old when my only son tried to take control of my home, my money, and my future. Until that day, I believed that being a good mother meant continuing to help your children no matter how old they became, even when they stopped calling regularly, even when they had families and problems of their own, and even when they rarely asked how you were feeling. My son Ryan was 35. He lived in another state with his wife Claire. After my husband Thomas died, Ryan became the only close family member I had left. At least that was what I believed. Thomas and I had been married for 38 years. We bought our home when we were young, raised Ryan inside it, and slowly filled every room with memories. His childhood height marks were still faintly visible inside the kitchen doorway. Thomas's gardening tools were arranged in the garage exactly as he had left them, and a photograph from our 25th wedding anniversary still hung above the fireplace. After Thomas passed away, the house became painfully quiet, but it was still my home. I knew every sound the floorboards made and every place where the afternoon sunlight entered through the windows. Ryan sometimes told me that the house was too large for one person, but I never felt ready to leave it. One Tuesday morning, Ryan called me sounding unusually cheerful. He said he had a surprise and asked whether I remembered always talking about wanting to see the ocean. Before I could answer, he announced that he and Claire were planning a vacation and wanted me to come with them. For a moment, I could not speak. Thomas and I had always planned to travel after retirement, but he became ill before we had the opportunity. I had not taken a real vacation in more than 20 years. Ryan knew how much that dream meant to me. "Are you serious?" I asked him. "Of course, Mom," he replied. "You deserve it." Those 4 words reached a lonely part of my heart. I wanted to believe that my son had finally noticed how isolated I had become. I wanted to believe he had been thinking about me and wanted to give me something meaningful. Ryan said we would be leaving the following Friday. When I asked about the cost, he told me everything had already been arranged and that Claire and he were taking care of it. I should have requested the hotel information or asked to see the full reservation, but I was so happy to feel included that I ignored a small feeling of uneasiness inside me. I spent the following week preparing for the trip. I bought a small suitcase, 2 new dresses, comfortable walking shoes, and a light blue scarf. I went to the salon for the first time in months and even purchased sunscreen, although I could not remember the last time I had needed it. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt genuinely excited. I told my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, that I was finally going to see the ocean. She smiled and said that I deserved a little happiness. Hearing those words again made the trip feel even more special. The night before the flight, Ryan arrived at my house. He hugged me quickly, placed my suitcase in the trunk, and said we needed to leave early because the airport would be crowded. Claire was sitting in the passenger seat. She turned around, gave me a polite smile, and asked whether I was ready for an adventure. During the drive, Ryan and Claire spoke quietly to each other. Whenever I asked about the hotel, Ryan gave me short answers. He told me everything was arranged and that I should relax. When I asked how close the hotel was to the beach, he said I would see when we arrived. Claire barely looked at me. She spent most of the journey staring through the window or checking her phone. I told myself that they were probably tired or trying to keep the vacation details a surprise, but the uncomfortable feeling in my chest continued to grow. At the airport, Ryan removed my suitcase from the car and walked with us into the terminal. The building was crowded with families, children, luggage carts, and people rushing towards security. Announcements echoed from the ceiling while I tried to remain close to Ryan and Claire. Ryan handed me a blue folder containing my identification, boarding pass, and several other documents. When I asked where their tickets were, Claire quickly replied that they had everything stored on their phones. Ryan then pointed toward a row of seats near the check-in area and told me to sit down while they spoke with the airline. I asked whether something was wrong, but he placed his hand on my shoulder and assured me that everything was fine. He said they would return in a few minutes. I trusted him, sat down beside my suitcase and watched them disappear into the crowd. 10 minutes passed, followed by 20 and then 40. I called Ryan, but his phone went directly to voicemail. I called Claire and received no answer. I tried to remain calm, telling myself that they might be handling a ticket problem or standing somewhere without phone reception. After nearly an hour, I opened the blue folder again. That was when I noticed that the boarding pass had only my name printed on it. There were no tickets for Ryan or Claire. Even more disturbing, the destination was not the coastal city Ryan had mentioned. It was a different state, in a place I had never heard of. My hands began to shake as I examined the remaining documents. A young airport employee noticed me struggling and came over to ask whether I needed help. Her name tag said Olivia. I explained that I was waiting for my son and daughter-in-law, who had gone to speak with the airline. Olivia studied my boarding pass and asked whether I was traveling alone. I told her no, but she gently explained that the reservation appeared to be for only one passenger. I insisted that there had to be a mistake. Olivia asked for Ryan's full name and checked the airline system. After a few moments, the expression on her face changed. She told me there was no reservation for my son or his wife on that flight. The sounds of the airport seemed to fade. I looked toward the entrance, the airline desks, and every face moving through the terminal. Ryan was nowhere to be seen. I called him again, and this time he answered. When I demanded to know where he was, he told me to stay calm. I reminded him that he had left me alone and that the airline had confirmed he was not traveling. Ryan sighed and said the situation was complicated. I could hear Claire saying something in the background. When I asked who would meet me at the destination, there was a long silence before he finally admitted the truth. He told me I was being sent to a private assisted living community. For several seconds, I could not understand what he had said. I reminded him that he had promised me a vacation, but he replied that he knew I would have refused if he had told me the truth. He started describing the facility as if he were selling me a hotel package, mentioning nurses, private rooms, activities, and beautiful grounds. I asked why he was doing this. He said I lived alone, that my home was too large, and that I could fall without anyone knowing. I reminded him that I had never asked him to take care of me, but he insisted that was not the point. And I suddenly understood what the real point was. My house, I said. This is about my house, isn't it? Ryan did not answer. My home had increased significantly in value over the years, and during the previous 6 months he had repeatedly asked whether I planned to sell it. He said the stairs were dangerous and the maintenance was becoming too difficult. Once he even suggested that I sell it and allow him to invest part of the money for me. When I asked whether he planned to sell the house while I was gone, he told me not to make the situation harder than it needed to be. The assisted living reservation was for 3 months, and he admitted that during that time he and Claire planned to prepare my home for sale. I told him he had no right to make decisions about my life or property. His response was simply, "I'm your son." That was when I realized he truly believed being my child gave him ownership over me. I asked him to return to the airport immediately. He then admitted that he and Claire were already on the highway. They had not gone to speak with the airline at all. They had returned to their car and driven away while I waited for them like a foolish old woman who still trusted her child. I ended the call and stared at my phone. Olivia remained beside me and gently asked whether I was all right. For most of my life I had said yes, even when the truth was no, but that day I could no longer pretend. "No," I said, "I am not all right." Before we continue, subscribe to Unheard Drama Stories if you believe that family betrayal should never be hidden behind shame or silence. Your support helps more stories like Margaret's finally be heard. Olivia took me to a quiet office and brought me a glass of water. She asked whether there was anyone I could call. I looked through the contacts on my phone and saw the names of neighbors, former coworkers, and people from church, but embarrassment stopped me from calling them. How could I admit that my own son had tricked me? How could I explain that I had signed documents and followed him to the airport without questioning him? Then I remembered Robert Miller. Robert had been Thomas's closest friend. After my husband died, he checked on me every few weeks, repaired a broken window, helped with a flat tire, and delivered Groceries when I was sick. He never asked about my money and never made me feel like a burden. I had not spoken with him in nearly 2 months, but I called him anyway. He answered immediately and asked whether everything was all right. The kindness in his voice broke something inside me and I began to cry. "I'm at the airport," I told him. "Ryan left me here." Robert did not waste time asking questions. He simply told me to remain where I was and promised he was coming. 40 minutes later, he walked into the office, breathing heavily because he had hurried from the parking garage. When he saw me, he opened his arms and I stood up and hugged him. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. After I explained what had happened, Robert asked whether Ryan had recently asked me to sign any documents. His question made my stomach tighten. 2 weeks earlier, Ryan had brought several papers to my house and claimed they were needed to update my insurance information and create an emergency medical file. I had trusted him and signed everywhere he placed a yellow marker. Robert immediately called his daughter, Emily, who was an attorney. After hearing the situation, Emily advised us not to return home until the police had checked the property. She also instructed us to photograph every page inside the blue folder. One of the documents was a limited power of attorney. My signature appeared on the final page. It gave Ryan permission to access financial information and communicate with certain institutions on my behalf. The document did not allow him to sell my home without further approval, but it gave him far more access than I had ever knowingly agreed to give him. Emily told me to revoke it immediately and contact my bank's fraud department. While Robert drove away from the airport, I called the bank and temporarily froze my accounts. Then I contacted the police and 2 officers agreed to meet us outside my home. When we arrived, the front door was unlocked, even though I knew I had secured it before leaving. Inside, several drawers were open and important files were missing from my desk. My jewelry box had been moved, although nothing appeared to have been taken. On the dining table was a folder from a real estate company. It contained an estimated sale price for my home, photographs of the exterior, and notes about repairs that might increase the property's value. Real estate agent's business card was attached to the folder. One of the officers called the agent. She explained that Ryan had told her I was moving permanently and wanted him to handle the initial arrangements. She had already visited the property with him several days earlier while I was attending a church luncheon. That meant my son had entered my house and walked a stranger through every room without my permission. He had already started planning the sale of my life. Ryan told the police that he was only preparing for my future. He claimed I had become forgetful and had previously agreed to consider assisted living. None of it was true. The most frightening discovery came when we contacted the assisted living facility. Ryan had told the staff that I knew about the move but might pretend to be confused because I was experiencing memory problems. If I had boarded that flight and told the staff I had been tricked, they might have believed him instead of me. The facility immediately canceled the reservation and preserved every email and document Ryan had submitted. The manager apologized repeatedly and assured me that they would cooperate with any investigation. That evening, Robert stayed with me. I sat at the kitchen table looking through old family photographs. In one picture, Ryan was 6 years old, missing a front tooth and holding a red toy airplane. In another, he was asleep on Thomas's chest. I remembered every fever, school project, birthday cake, and sleepless night. I remembered working extra hours to pay for summer camp and helping with his college expenses. I wondered when my little boy had become a man capable of leaving his mother alone at an airport. Robert placed a cup of tea in front of me and told me not to blame myself for trusting my son. When I said that I had raised him, Robert reminded me that I had raised a child but had not chosen the decisions he made as an adult. The following morning, Emily came to my house. She helped me formally revoke the power of attorney, change the locks, secure my accounts, and organize the evidence. Then she asked whether I wanted to report Ryan for financial exploitation. Those words hurt deeply. Financial exploitation sounded cold and official, but it also sounded true. I did not want revenge, and I did not want my son to go to prison, but I understood that remaining silent would protect him instead of me. I made a formal report. Ryan called many times during the following days. At first, he was angry and accused me of embarrassing him. He complained that Claire's family had discovered what happened and that the police had contacted his employer. Later, his tone became soft. In one voicemail, he said he loved me and only wanted me to be safe. But love does not lie to you, steal your choices, or leave you alone in a crowded airport and call it protection. I did not answer him. A week later, Claire came to my house alone. I saw her through the new security camera, she said. Ryan did not know she was there and begged me to let her explain. I allowed her inside, but Robert and Emily remained present. Claire looked exhausted and her eyes were swollen from crying. She admitted that the plan had originally been Ryan's idea. At first, Ryan told her I had agreed to spend 3 months at the assisted living community. Later, she learned the truth but still continued helping him. When I asked why, she lowered her head and admitted that they were deeply in debt. They had borrowed money to start a business, but the business failed. They had unpaid credit cards, personal loans, and overdue rent. Ryan believed selling my house would solve their financial problems. My house was not his solution, I told her. Claire started crying and said she had told him the plan was wrong but had been afraid to stop him. I reminded her that I had also been afraid, except she knew what was happening while I did not. Before leaving, Claire gave Emily copies of messages between herself and Ryan. The messages proved they had planned everything for weeks. In one message, Ryan wrote that once I was inside the facility, I would become frightened and eventually agree to sell. In another message, he wrote that I was too trusting to examine the documents carefully. Those words hurt more than I expected. My son had not only taken advantage of my trust, he had mocked it. The legal case moved slowly. Ryan was not sent to prison, but a court ordered him to repay money he had taken from one of my accounts. He was also restricted from managing or accessing my finances and property. Claire eventually separated from him. Ryan began sending letters and I read the first one. He apologized, but most of the letter focused on his debt, pressure, fear, and failed business. He wrote very little about my fear, so I placed the letter inside a drawer. Several months later, I joined a local support group for older adults who had experienced financial abuse by family members. At first, I sat in the back and listened while others shared their experiences. One man had lost his retirement savings to his nephew. A woman had been pressured into signing her house over to her daughter. Another discovered that her grandson had secretly used her bank card for years. Every person in the room carried the same shame. We all believed that we should have known better, and that trusting our families had somehow made us foolish. One afternoon, I finally told my story. I described the promised vacation, the airport chair, the unanswered calls, the one-way ticket, and the house they planned to sell. When I finished, a woman named Patricia reached across the table and held my hand. She told me that her daughter had done something similar and that she had always believed she was the only one. That was when I understood the danger of silence. Shame makes people hide and silence convinces them that they are alone, but when one person speaks, another person may finally find the courage to speak too. I kept my house, but I changed it. I sold some furniture I no longer needed and transformed Ryan's old bedroom into a reading room. I painted the walls pale yellow and placed a comfortable chair beside the window. I installed security cameras, learned how to monitor my accounts online, and placed important documents inside a secure box. Most importantly, I stopped believing that protecting myself made me a bad mother. Robert and I also began spending more time together. We attended community events, went on walks, and occasionally had dinner at a small restaurant near the library. He never tried to replace Thomas. He simply reminded me that my life had not ended when my husband died. The following summer, Robert and a group from our community center planned a trip to the coast. When he invited me, I almost refused because airports and suitcases still reminded me of Ryan. Betrayal. But I did not want my son's actions to steal the ocean from me too. So I went. When I finally stood on the beach, the wind moved through my hair and the water stretched farther. And I could see. I watched the waves roll toward the shore, disappear, and return again. Ryan had tried to use my dream to take away my freedom, but he had failed. The following year, on my 63rd birthday, Ryan appeared at my door. I saw him through the camera. He looked thinner, older, and exhausted. He said he knew he did not deserve my forgiveness and asked for 5 minutes. I almost sent him away. But eventually I opened the door. I did not invite him inside. Ryan stood on the porch with tears in his eyes and told me he had been wrong. I waited for excuses about debt and desperation, but this time they did not come. Not desperate, not confused, and not pressured, he said, I was wrong. For the first time, he admitted that he had treated my life as though it belonged to him. He said he had convinced himself that he was solving a problem, but finally understood that I had never been the problem. Part of me wanted to hug him. Another part remembered the airport chair, the unanswered calls, and a ticket containing only my name. I love you, I told him, but love is not the same as trust. I explained that he could write to me and that perhaps one day we could meet for coffee in a public place, but he would never again control my money, my home, or my decisions. I also warned him that if he ever lied to me again, there would be no additional chance. Ryan wiped his eyes and thanked me for opening the door. I opened the door, I replied. I did not erase the past. Then he left. As I watched him walk toward his car, I did not feel victorious or defeated. I simply felt free. Today, my life is quieter than it once was, but it is no longer empty. I have friends who check on me because they care, not because they want something. I travel, read, attend my support group, and ask questions before signing any document. I no longer believe that being a good mother means accepting every kind of pain from your child. Sometimes love means helping, and sometimes it means forgiving, but sometimes love means closing the door until the person on the other side learns how to knock with respect. My son left me alone at the airport, but that was not the day my life ended. It was the day I finally began living it for myself. You have been listening to Unheard drama stories, where the stories hidden behind silence are finally given a voice. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to remember that setting boundaries does not make you cruel, it means you finally understand your own worth.